why would I be anything else when I could be me? No, but seriously, like, I could just do me, Like, I could just live my life as me. Just whole, complete, just myself. Unabridged.
All right, and welcome to episode 10 of Unabridged. I am your host, Dom Miller, and I am so excited because Unabridged has officially reached double digits. That is a feat. That is a mountainous task in the world of production and content creation. So, shout out to me for keeping this going, and shout out to my team. We have such a great episode in store for you today. I am so excited to really dive into this episode. This is our first ever Black History Month episode of Unabridged. That means something because Unabridged is a very Black show. One of my mentors actually pointed out to me that all my guests so far have been Black. I promise I'll probably find a few non-Black people to join at some point, but that's just the network. We're in Philly. We're super Black and Black all the time, especially Unabridged. So, no, excited for our inaugural episode of our Black History Month mini series that we're doing, and we have an awesome guest. But of course, before we jump into our Unabridged journey for the week, we have to do my favorite segment. Let's get into it and dive into our big three for the week. Let's get into it.
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 All right, let's get into it for the week. So again, we are hitting our big three, as we talked about before, big three topics, big three things that I saw this week that I just wanted to talk about. They matter to our lives, they matter to what's going on, and I just kind of want to chat about the last one because I feel like I have to. So let's just get into it. All right, so we are back. I've been saying this for the longest, and of course, my Let's Get Into It's always kind of feature something that is going on at city council because they, as I always say, have the most direct and immediate impact on your life from the legislative level, from the governmental level. Your municipal electeds, that you're going to feel that more instant, right? So we're always going to start out with the city council girlies. So this past Thursday, that was actually February 1st, there were 4 members of the Philadelphia City Council announced the creation of what they're calling the Kensington Caucus. Now, if you remember, we talked about Kensington and a lot of our other Let's Get Into It episodes. For example, we talked about, the new process for opening up a safe injection site, or I can't remember the other name for it, the more appropriate term for it, but we talked about that. We talked about, some of the other histories of what was going on in Kensington. But now we are jumping into a new term with a new set of council members who are really excited, I guess, to shake things up. For a long time, Kensington has just been seen as this issue that is just lost, right? It's how can we even do anything about this area? What resources can we direct here? What actually can be done to solve the Kensington crisis? But this past Thursday, 4 members, and I'm reading this directly from the article that I quoted, and it's also going to be in my show notes, so you can check this out for yourself. This new caucus of 4 members who have made improving the conditions in the neighborhood a key priority. The caucus includes Councilmember Ketty Lozado, Mike Driscoll, whose districts, like Squilla's, include part of Kensington, as well as at-large Councilmember Jim Harity, who live in the neighborhood. So that means, again, Councilmember Lozado, Councilmember Driscoll, Councilmember Squilla, and Councilmember Harity all make up what they're calling the Kensington Caucus because of either their proximity to the district, the fact that it is their district, or the fact that because they're at-large member, they literally live there and see it every day. Now, what this plan and one of the things that they're pushing for is this thing that they call triage centers that will provide individuals with support, judicial-led programs that individuals would have to follow, and lastly, arresting and removing those off the streets who persist to accept treatment. What does that mean? So that basically means now they are trying to insert a lot of levels of real mental health supports, real resources supports before we get down to locking people up. Because at the end of the day, no matter what, you feel about the disease of addiction, right? the fact is that people are actively using illegal drugs on the street. They are really disturbing those businesses. They have brought down the entire neighborhood of Kensington. And this is a real addiction that the government really let spiral out of control. But at the same time, that doesn't mean what is happening is not wrong, right? So that is why, I like that this plan really focuses on, providing as many resources as possible before it gets to the point of having to lock somebody up, for their addiction. Now, the only thing is, and this is not listed in an article that I'm actually sharing for this week, but it was a part of an Instagram post that I saw this week while preparing for the episode, that soon after they made this announcement, there were droves of police vehicles that were seen picking up individuals off the streets of Kensington, and people really didn't know where they were taking them from. Now, that story is still developing because no information has officially been released about it yet, but the timing of it was really interesting. Now, Councilmember Lozado has come out to say that she is not familiar or does not know what the procedures are for this recent interaction with police in the community. She's not familiar. And again, we still have our executive branch who has made clear, and this is mentioned in the article, that Kensington and addressing the Kensington crisis will be a major part of her tenure as mayor. So we do see that not only in council, but also at the executive level, addressing the Kensington crisis is a major, sticking point. Now, whether or not these parties see the same way in addressing the crisis is the other aspect of this. So, as we get more information about this, I will keep talking about this. I think I keep bringing up Kensington and the issue there is because, this is something that people love to point at when they look at Philly, right? We've had so many random doc crews come here and people, just talk about what it means to be on the streets of Kensington. And I really want to start contributing to a narrative that, no, this is not just something that the city of Philadelphia is allowing to happen. I mean, to a certain extent, but no, that this is something that people are thinking about, that are in their minds consistently. It's just that every turn, there seems to be issues or procedural aspects or a lack of collaboration from the departments that are responsible for this that is really getting in the way of this. So, I'm just happy to see that members are still continuously pushing. They have not given up on it because these are still neighborhoods where Philadelphians live in. These are still areas where young people go to school. I think about schools like Conwell Middle School that is at the heart of this. I think about Sankofa Freedom Academy, which is in the heart of this. Kensington Kappa, which is in the heart of this. These are schools that have young people ages pre-K to high school that are witnessing this. And because of that, they are starting to embody this as a norm. And that is the real effect of this that truly is scary. But again, we'll keep you updated and keep talking about this story as we learn more about how the Kensington Caucus plans on rolling out resources, as well as how Mayor Parker plans to address this, as well as hopefully finding out where these people went. Probably by the time this episode comes out, we may have more information. I'm recording this on a Saturday. This episode drops on a Tuesday. So, news is always happening, and we'll just try to keep you posted as best as possible. All right, next up, again, another one that is going to be remaining topics throughout the Let's Get Into It is voting, especially 2024. In this particular little section, we want to talk about the voter apathy that is being felt, not just amongst Pennsylvanians, but across the nation, specifically amongst people of color. Now, in this, I guess like a little write-up or analysis by Larry Platt and The Citizen this past week, they talk about how Mayor Josh Shapiro, how Governor Shapiro really put a charge out there to people, especially Black men, to get the vote up. I mean, like he talked about a lot of stuff, but he really talked about, the gist that Philadelphia has a lot riding on us, as we always do, as a major swing territory for Biden. Now, granted, right, Philadelphia is always Democratic, right? We have an unprecedented amount of Democratic voters. That is why many of our legislative bodies are made up the way that they are. But at the same time, there are levels of Democratic voting can shift the entire state. And that's something that, he really dives into in an article and talked about his victory and how his victory literally could have been even more enormous had we had tapped into the full potential of Philadelphia for voters. Now, going into 2024, we are again at this space where Philly, not just Pennsylvania, but Philadelphia is really going to be pushing or driving the wave of what could actually happen in 2024 primary. So, for you guys, some important dates. April 23rd is the primary election. Now, granted, for us, Democrats doesn't really mean a lot because Biden is going to be the bull. We know that, right? And we're heading into, again, Trump likely being the bull. Now, Nikki, she's still out here plugging away, and she keeps saying she's going to stick it out, and her voter base feels like, she's the best alternative from Biden and Joe. I get that, right? We understand that, but at the end of the day, Trump consistently knocks her out in each one of these primary races, and it just doesn't look like it's going to change. So we're likely going to be seeing this rematch that we saw in 2020 with it being Trump v. Biden. And a major determination of that is going to be where the black vote actually falls. And in an article by Pew Charitable Trust that was just released as well, black voters, especially across the state, is going to increase and be a quarter of the vote in 2024. In Pennsylvania specifically, we're looking at being about 14 to 15% of the voter turnout. 14 to 15% of eligible voters in Pennsylvania are people of color. Now, I overly understand voter apathy, especially when you don't really have much of a selection. You're really just going there to do your due diligence. But at the end of the day, that due diligence is going to set the path and the narrative for not just our nation, but the world. We are at a very vulnerable position, right? That's such a tongue twister. We are literally in the midst of two wars. And even though we are not actively fighting, as they keep telling us, which I do not believe, because the girls have bases everywhere, but we are enthralled in two active wars right now. And that is going to definitely either escalate or increase or whatever based upon who sits in that presidential seat in 2025. So voter apathy is real. We understand that a lot of people, especially, people of color, are starting to look towards this Trump side. I saw recently, and they talked about this on one of my favorite podcasts, that Snoop Dogg even came out for Trump because he was excited about pardoning somebody that he knew. And a lot of the rap girls are kind of following suit to that. And again, that becomes very scary for us because of the power that they possess in this race. Now, I'm going to put a charge out to any black men that are Democrats that understand this to really rally and support the other men around them, because, that is the demographic that the girls are worried about. And I am not team, UNABRDG is not team shit on black men. We will never be that. Now, Dom in her personal life, that may be another situation. Just kidding. But we are not team shit on black men. Never that. But at the end of the day, that is the demographic that people are worried about, is black males, right? And after being overly policed, overly arrested, overly targeted for years, it's like, well, what is Democrats gonna get me, right? And even if you're like a real student of history, people would look at it and be like, oh, well, wasn't it a Democrat who really basically created the war on drugs, which contributed to mass incarceration? Looking at you, Bill Clinton. Yeah. Right. So when you, as a black man, when you look at some of the histories of what the Democratic Party has done for you, I overly understand. But, and one thing my mentor always says is that we never try the opposite, right? We've never tried to see what if we actually all did vote and see what it got us. Maybe we should try that one. So yes, the 2024 primary is shaping up and we are getting closer and closer. April 23rd is the primary election for Pennsylvania. The last day to register to vote for that primary is April 8th, 2024. The general election is November 5th, and the last day to register for that is October 21st. So you still got time to make a difference and tell somebody else to make a difference, because one thing that we just cannot accept is that the fact that black people are not civically engaged. I will not accept that anymore. All right. That's it for that one. Let's move along to the last one. And the last one, again, I said I'll try to make it fun and try to make it, like a little one that's about what's going on. And I think when this episode comes out, we could just be in a way different space with this beef. And I call it, I should have said beef, right? Because I'm putting beef this whole time in air quotes, because it's not really a beef. It's giving one young lady coming into her true colors, speaking her mind, and another older lady unraveling. So, of course, we had to talk about the Nicki Minaj and Meg Thee Stallion scuffle. Now, when this episode comes out, we are probably the second week into this. His dropped the week before last, and then what is this? Her Bigfoot dropped on Monday. So we're like a solid week into this beef, which in the world of, this day and age, that's That's old, right? Things was happening every single day with this. Updates are happening every single day. So there's not going to be much new that I could add to this, right? That hasn't already been said, probably super eloquently by some other content creator or made in a dance by some TikToker. There's not much new I could say. What I do want to talk about is the responses, because the responses have been like some of my most favorite about this, right? Not the actual beef itself, because Hiss was dope. I loved Hiss. Don't need to talk about Bigfoot, but the fact that these two powerhouse women are actually like in this has just created and allowed for and just ushered in so much, like, what do you call it? What are the girls? Muses. They have acted as muses for so much creative content, and I appreciate it. I be on TikTok cracking up these days. So I'm just going to go to some of my favorite responses that have just come out of this beef. So the first and foremost, always, and this is in order. This is literally in order, because number one has to be the Crystal and Kid Fury episode that just dropped this last week. Burnt Plastic. They spent the whole entire episode talking about this beef, and I love that. I love the read so much, and I love the way that Crystal and Kid Fury look at things sometimes, because they're not just going to be like, oh, I'm going to read a bitch down. They're going to give you the historical context of why the thing that you are doing is stupid, right? Because they've been around for so long, and they've been talking about this pop culture stuff since I was probably like a middle school. So they have seen a lot of the ups and downs with the girlies. But at the same time, you could tell that Crystal, they do their research, right? So when they just went in about just so much of the hypocrisy that Nikki was lying out for us, right? Down to her name being based off of Roman Polanski. Like, there was just so many levels to this that they brought out that I was like, damn, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even realize that's what they meant. So I think, that response, that whole episode, I was just so happy that they actually just dedicated it all to this beef, because I was like, I'm curious to know what the girls are saying about this. I want to know some other varied opinions. And like most of the internet, it's like Team Meg or like concern for Nikki. And I could just be in like this bubble of my own, which is very pro Meg, right? Which could definitely be a thing, because I know there are barbs that are in their TikTok really, talking about, I'm not going to repeat anything from that song, but, mimicking and using it for their TikToks. They're 100% doing that. But everybody else, the same people, they know where they at. So shout out to the read. Always like inspiration, like always bow down to them. That is like, amazing. So that was one of my favorite responses. The second favorite response was, I know she's problematic, so I'm going to give that little precursor, the Azalea Banks response that she had. And most specifically, not the full thing, but most specifically her analysis of like Nicki and Jay-Z's like weirdness, right? And for most of you who don't know, or probably do know already, that Meg Thee Stallion is actually one of Roc Nation's artists to a certain extent. Like, they are her management, even though she's not under their label. So they manage Meg Thee Stallion. And for so long, people have been kind of watching Nicki in some ways either like reach out to Jay or try to create these relationships with him. And when Azalea was breaking it down, I was like, yo, you have a point. She talked about, how that she got with Meek Mills to try to get closer to Roc Nation. Granted, none of this stuff was said it was officially a thing, but at the end of the day, like, that kind of makes sense. Because like, even when Nicki and Meek were dating, I was like, how did you find this random Philly bull? Like, what? But I mean, I guess it's a part of her narrative now. We see who she married. But at the time, it was like, why are you with Meek? That's so random. So the Meek Mills thing, she's mentioned in songs before that the only other place she would assign to is with Jay. It didn't happen, clearly. It talked about her trying to build this relationship with Beyonce. Like, so many things that she was pointing out. And I was like, damn, maybe Nicki is hating about the Jay-Z fact. Especially because right around the beef, Roc Nation tweeted and said, download his. So it just really was just like, wow, like the girls are really philosophers out here. They really be like into the weeds of this stuff. So shout out to Azalea's one little video. The rest of her stuff, I can't co-sign. And last but not least, all the TikTokers that explained verse for verse for people who missed it, and specifically Hiss. I don't need no verse for verse breakdown of the other girly. I don't really need that. But what I do need is, a breakdown. I needed a breakdown for some aspects of, why am I doing this? Is this still recorded? Oh, sorry, my bad. I had to check to see if it's still recorded. My bad. I'm gonna cut that. So what I did not need was a breakdown of Bigfoot. Nobody needed that. But some of the like bars in his, I was just like, yo, she has so many different layers to this. And there were so many lovely, informative, in the know TikTokers that really broke it down for me. So I love y'all. Shout out to y'all. I'm not gonna go through and list all the girls because I've been on TikTok a lot these days lately, and it's too many to name. But shout out to those creators who did that. And again, I wanted to talk about the responses and not the beef itself, because the beef did not give us what we wanted it. I wanted it to be real hip hop. I wanted it to be like, oh my gosh, like these is tracks for tracks. Or just give me some fun subliminals like she did with Remy. She didn't even do that. And that's how I know, and I wanted to bring this up too, that something is going on, right? Because the Remy diss, and granted, whatever you want to say, at the time, popularity rise, Meg was probably up here, and Remy probably was around here somewhere, right? So maybe responding to her wasn't the best, wasn't, in Nicki's purview, and, wasn't the same level as Meg, but she still came at her with, like, receipts and with some raggedy stuff during this beef, and Nicki just gave some cute subliminals and kept it pushing, right? And I think that might have been some of the most time that she ever, like, stood in her I'm Nicki Minaj in this, is when she did not respond to Rem. And that's why, like, seeing the way she responded to Meg, who literally any of her messages could have been applied to so many other people outside of Nicki, she took that to heart and lost her freaking mind. Right? So the only difference is that man. The only difference is that man. Oh, goodness. The girls are letting me down. They are truly letting me down. Well, Nicki is, not Meg. Meg makes me so excited. She just signed an amazing publishing deal now where she's gonna get all of her, what do you call it? Her records and all that stuff is gonna be hers. Like, that is amazing. She is flourishing. And poor Nicki just, she's going through it. And it makes me so sad because, like, not to say that I was a Barb. I always say I was a Barb light. Because I remember when Itty Bitty Piggy and all that stuff came out. I was definitely like, I was on the plane with, yes, that was me all day. But now just to watch this, it's like that Jay-Z line, like just watching all my heroes become villains. All right, that's been Let's Get Into It for the week. Let's, dive right into this next episode or next segment of the Unabridged Journey for the week. I am so excited. We're going to be talking to Dr. Ashley Jordan, who is the president and CEO of the African American Museum in Philadelphia. I thought this was an amazing way to kick off our Black History Month episode because, the African American Museum is going to be going through an amazing historical transition that this incredible woman is going to be leading. So we're going to jump into that, look into some of her journey, and also talk about the legacy of this project and what it can mean for Black history after this quick commercial break.
It's important to be our whole, unedited, unabridged selves whenever possible, being fully authentic with our audience. But what about those moments that we can't be? What if tomorrow you had to sit on a panel, give an interview, deliver a speech, or even go on TV? Would you know what to say and how to say it so that your message is best received? Reach out to Halom Strategies to help your dream become a reality. Halom Strategies is here for your media training or branding needs to help others see you the way that you want to be seen. Reach out to Halom Strategies, that's HALOM, online, on Instagram or LinkedIn. Now, back to Unabridged.
Okay, let's get into it. So this is our lovely Unabridged Journey for this week. I am so excited, as I say every other week at this point, for this awesome guest that is going to be joining us today. I have had the pleasure of working with this young lady for over a year now at this point on an incredible project and an amazing institution in the city of Philadelphia that we're going to, talk about in this interview and really get into it. But outside of her amazing work that she's done for this amazing institution that we'll get into, I've watched this young lady kind of matriculate into a new space, into a new city that is not the easiest city to kind of work into. And we're going to talk about that on today's episode. So please welcome on our journey today, Dr. Ashley Jordan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for coming. I always appreciate just our conversations in general. So I'm happy to have you on the show today.
Yes, and I'm glad that we have this platform to take some of the conversations that we do talk about, particularly in areas of history and education and its impact on the community. So I am excited for today's today's session.
This is going to be great. So for those of you who may not know, Dr. Ashley Jordan is the president and CEO of the African American Museum of Philadelphia, right here in Philly. It is an institution that has been around for a very long time. And Dr. Jordan is not only the president right now, but she's going to be leading an amazing, amazing transition to a location that the museum finally deserves. So before we get into that, I want to talk more about Dr. Jordan. So for the people who don't know you, tell us a little about yourself.
So I'm coming by way of Ohio, a transplant from Cincinnati. I last served as the VP of Development for the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati. And so that is an institution that is located on the banks of the Ohio River, which talks about the importance of freedom today, but it has a viewpoint taken from the Underground Railroad. But then where the focus is as of today is our war on human trafficking. And for me, talking about freedom as a theme within a museum and how it can connect to people regardless of age or even racial background, it's so important. And so when the call came from the Campbell Company, which is a search firm based out of Chicago, they asked me would I be interested in this role as the president and CEO of the African American Museum in Philadelphia. And at the time, I hadn't. It's like we knew about the African American Museum in Philadelphia, but not in the way that it should have been known. And I was like, well, let me, see the application, let me see the job announcement. And so I had a chance to review it. And I looked at it and I saw some of the things that they were looking for. And I felt like this is something that I could do. But then as I was talking to the recruiter, I happened to catch myself in a mirror. And I had on a T-shirt that said African American Museum in Philadelphia. And I was like, I think I'm supposed to.
Right, it's like a lie, like the universe is telling me.
Exactly. And so I went through the necessary rounds. We kept going. And one of the things that I know I wanted to stress within my interviews that I felt like it was a museum that forgot it was a museum. And it was so important that for this institution, this crowning jewel, it's important that we well position ourselves in that conversation of other cultural institutions in this country because people have options. They had D.C.
Yep.
You have Nashville, which is a music museum. Charleston just recently opened the International African American Museum. And so these people can pass us up to get to those places. And I wanted to make sure that our museum was well positioned as a must-visit destination. And so shortly thereafter, after I accepted the role, came to Philly, with the help of our board and our staff, being connected to City Council to share this vision about where AMP wants to be. We have on our board Councilman Isaiah Thomas, former Council President Darrell Clark, Councilwoman Cindy Bass, and former Councilman Derek Clark, and Catherine Gilmer. I mean, just and so on and so on. They were all there at that convening, like where I had to do like a PowerPoint presentation talking about the fact that there are 300 African-American cultural sites in the country today. But where is Philadelphia?
Right.
Like all these new options, how can we position ourselves? And the opportunity came for AMP because throughout its history, we're supposed to move many times. And one of the things, even on our job, myself, the board, and the staff was like, we really gotta, if we say we're gonna do this, we gotta see this through.
Yep.
Like we'll lose our ability as a site of public trust if we don't see this project through. And so I'm just happy things aligned the way they were supposed to. And now we're moving to the Parkway in 2028. So I'm really excited about that.
I love that. And we're going to talk more about that transition. But I think, I think that you seeing that alignment to bring you to Philly, I think it was amazing because I feel like the museum has needed you. I think that you have provided a new energy to that space. But I feel like that just doesn't come naturally for a lot of us sometimes, especially in like the space of history and Black history, unfortunately, because sometimes people see our history as shrouded in so much sadness and not really in the inspiration that it should be. So can you talk about what really brought you to history? Because your PhD is not just a history, it's an American history, right? So can you talk about what really drove you to really make history your passion and why you continue?
Yeah, for me, I had an internship at the Smithsonian, the American History Museum, and it changed my life. I had went to school initially to be journalism, mass communication. I wanted to be a journalist. So just being in this setting is like, ooh. So, but yeah, I always loved history. I just thought you could only teach. And I never saw the possibilities of what you could do with a history degree until I had the internship. And the fact that you could show relationship and meaning from an artifact, like a cup or a pen, and how that's related to a person, a place, or an event. I was like, ooh, tell me more. And so from there, I had a really strong internship coordinator who helped me to just chart the plan as far as, this is a degree that requires you going on to grad school. And so I would say for any young person that the benefits of having an internship, particularly a strong site supervisor, will definitely help you to define, your next career path. And I think for me, that was really helpful for me to chart my future into this industry. And also, too, just with me coming to AMP, kind of like change the landscape of what a museum leader looks like. Because oftentimes museum leaders are of a certain age, a certain look. I mean, and so you can go on and on and on.
I mean, I think most of our cultural institutions in Philadelphia are run by older white men and women.
Yeah. And that's another reality. When I first, my first internships, they were always men. My supervisors were men, but how things have changed. You see more women, you see younger leaders coming forward. And really, from my board, what they were saying, they were ready for change. And I feel like right now, the way in which we have to approach history in this new landscape, thinking that people are always going to come to us when we're competing against phones and iPads and tablets, your information comes to you much more faster. And so we have to create our exhibitions that reflect the world in which people live in. It has to be fast, it has to be accessible, and it has to be attractive. So that's why us moving to the Parkway is so important, because we need a new slicker look, a sleek look, but more refined. Because right now our current exhibitions are outdated, and we want to enhance them to have a more attractive appeal to this generation.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in a city like Philadelphia, where history is just like in every inch. Our whole entire city is basically a museum. Shout out to the, cultural markers that you see all over the city. So I think, I love how you say that. And I think that our Black history needs to be celebrated, especially just like Philadelphia Black history needs to be celebrated in a way different light. And I think you could be a young person in the city of Philadelphia and not even know how much Black history, is happening or has happened in just places where you walked and went by to go to school, right? So I'm excited for AMP to really take that message of not just, African American history around the country, but what African Americans have done in Philadelphia to actually build where we are today. So I think that transition is going to be incredible, especially with you leading it. Like, I think that's going to be amazing. So talking about more in the history, like kind of taking it for a larger complex, why do you think it's important for people to have a great understanding of their history?
I think it's important that people have an understanding of their history so that they can interpret today, so that we won't repeat the mistakes of our past. That is really the true benefit of history, that we are working to be a better nation, but also to taking the lessons that we've learned to just increase educational awareness, cultural. I mean, there's so many things that history can teach us that we can just do better about. The other thing, too, just talking about our young people, about how Philly has so much history. People often forget that because of Philly, unlike places in the Deep South where African Americans, through our forced migration to this country, we don't have a viewpoint that starts in slavery. It's a viewpoint of freedom. And so I feel like just with that, you don't have to look far for inspiration. You don't have to look far. You don't have to look at Chicago, because that's the other thing. People think of these hubs as being Black centers. New York, you got Harlem, you got Detroit, you got Chicago. But Philadelphia has always been there. And I think that's the part that we want to show our children, how important Philadelphia's histories are. Because like you said, this is the only time, particularly for myself, where I have exhibitions that are connected to the communities and like the descendants and the grandchildren and the nieces and nephews. Like, this is community conversations, just in different forms through text labels and through artifacts of pictures and things of that nature. So this is pretty every day is like you're touching history.
Right,
So,
right. And it's like, because Philly is we're very much a Philly-centered city. So that's why I was like, that's why I always applaud your transition here, because Philly is so like, where are you from? What high school did you go to, right? But I think that watching you over the year and like, years and just how you've been able to kind of matriculate into the city so beautifully, and now to take that and now be able to tell our story, I think it's an incredible feat, to be honest. So that's going to be amazing. And I'm watching the ups and downs that are going through for this transition. It definitely takes a lot of being centered in the mission. So how do you really sustain, and how do you, I don't want to say how do you plan on sustaining, but like, how do you keep that going? Because this is an up and down battle for sure, but how do you continue to fight to make sure that this history gets the platform that it deserves?
I'm always, as you say, staying centered. I marvel at the stories of people like Mary McLeod Bethune, who with $1.50, faith in God, she started Bethune-Cookman College. She was like selling pies, or she was just through the chance encounter with just wealthy benefactors who could help, give back to the school. But how she started off with just those very, minimal beginnings, like Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington. I mean, so on, so on, so on. How they had less resources then, but they were able to build these great institutions. You think about Lincoln, you think about Cheney, even coming from Ohio, we had Wilberforce, which was the first privately owned African-American institution for higher learning. And this was like in the 1850s, like during the time of the Civil War. Like how? You know what I mean? So if they can do it then, knowing that we have more resources, more opportunities for crowdsourcing, just it's so important to be reminded of how far we've come and how I know we can get it done today. Because you don't have to look far for inspiration. And then I also think it's important too, in this work, because like you said, the setbacks are going to be there, but making sure the team that you compile is just as concerned as making sure we get to the finish line as I am. Like our board, our staff, community partners like you, just making sure we got ourselves in a very protected little bubble. Because, like you say, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. But as long as we stay centered on where the finish line is, I think we're going to get there.
Especially for our Black history, because no shade to any other cultures, but when people want to have Jewish museums, the girls are pouring out their pockets. They're like, go ahead, like this is all for you. But I think when we're telling Black stories, we are not only just saying we're not only just saying we have to get this done, but we are also along the way proving to people or having to show people why this is so important. And I think that is another layer, especially for Black women, especially as a Black woman especially as a Black woman, that makes your fight even harder through this time. So, and that's why I said, like, watching you through this, I always think it's amazing. I was like, you just always smile and stuff like that. Those people would drive me crazy sometimes. Like, don't you understand? Like, why would I have to fight? This is, how Black Philly is. Like, just give me this money. But no, I think that's gonna be amazing. So we talked about the move to the Parkway. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited about this, especially in a city like Philadelphia where all of our cultural institutions are there, right? Like you go to the Parkway, you're going to AMP. I mean, you're going to our, I always get my acronyms messed up. You go to the Philadelphia Art Museum, you're going to the Franklin, so it's amazing that, it's going to be a part of that. What does it mean for you to move, to kind of lead that charge to be a part of our other cultural icons in the city?
Well, to be a part of this conversation for a move, for a museum, is a blessing, in the sense that our first institution was built by the city, in part. Like, we're the first city-funded cultural institution in the country, and that was during the bicentennial. So to even have a second opportunity where we still have the same amount of support from our city, we don't take that lightly. Also, too, like I was saying, how there's over 300 cultural sites in the country. Everybody doesn't get the same support. There's still museums that look very much like a storefront, or just based off of the hard work efforts of one individual who, it may not even leave their living room. It's some very harsh realities out here as it relates to preserving African-American history and culture. But one of the things that I will say that I think our team is excited about, our board, we know that this is bigger than us. This is a legacy project. And very few people get to say in their lifetime that I was able to build a museum. Right. So I think that's the part that is just like, we are doing this because it's bigger than us.
Right, especially a museum that's celebrating our people. Right, and I think that's what really inspires me to continue to push this project with you all, because I think that, when it's built and at the end you can see this and what it's going to mean for not just me but the people that's going to come afterwards. Like, this is incredible. Like, you're talking about celebrating history while also being a part of it at the same time.
That's it.
So granted, like, you have your whole team and there's going to be consultants and things like that, but what do you want the legacy of this new museum to be?
I want this to be an experience, one that is multi-generational, one that invokes feelings of inspiration, pride, knowledge building. But to sum it up best, it's kind of like when we all went to go see Black Panther. When we walked out of that movie, it was like Black excellence. The feeling of the museum should evoke feelings of just, hope, pride, happiness. The same way we feel about Different World. Like, I want the African American Museum to be in that conversation of just, this is for the culture.
I love that because, like, I feel like we don't have a lot of spaces we can go to now, and then we leave feeling like that. Like, and I love that you brought up Black Panther, because we came suited and booted. We went and found our best Ankara we could find, and the girls were in the theater. And I think that was such a moment in history for us that it shouldn't just be a moment. Like, this should be a continuous thing. And I think I love us so much because when we do have those moments, like with even when The Color Purple came out, the ladies was coming there and they're purple, right? Like they were like, this is a part of our culture, and I think that we're always ready for that, even if we may not know it ourselves.
Yes.
Like I think that it's so beautiful. So what has been one of the hardest parts about kind of this move so far?
I would say some of the hardest parts have yet to still be determined.
Like we were at the cusp.
Because right now we're trying to build a team. So I would say for AMP, where we are currently, we're a small but mighty staff. We are a staff of like 15 people, but like each year we should be incrementally growing. So we like by the time we get to the Parkway, we'll be at 100. You know, so the vision of recruitment and retention, like I think that is the part, you know, working with our HR team where we're like we really got to strategize on how we're going to go after some very key and significant department leaders as well as the people who make the departments flow. So yeah, that is the part I think I'm starting to formulate, and it's just like, you know, you got to be up to date on HR. You know, just there's so much that you need to know, and it's just like, okay, yeah. So I feel like it's still formulating for AMP.
Yeah, no, and I love that you're like stressing the importance of your team. Like this
Yeah.
is not just like a centered mission. Like this is about all of us.
Right.
And I think the thing about the board with AMP is that it has so many different layers because clearly you have like your electeds and things like that. But then you just have like some of your OG members who have just been around and they're just like granted, like they're going to be like kind of like our cultural police.
Yes.
They're just like making sure we're doing it right. But they
Exactly.
carry so much of the history of where the museum is going, and I just love that. I love hearing, you know, their stories about the way that it's growth, and I love seeing their passion for it. Like shout out to Miss Roberta, because if she gonna be on the call, you know that things for AMP are gonna be taken care of, and she's been around for so long. So I just love that is so much pride in that and the board too, and so much pride in the people who are a part of this move too.
No, that's a perfect shout out. Like that was.
I think we always think about her when
Yes.
you have that in the back of your
Yes.
mind, and the fact that the board is also led by a woman of color,
Yes.
Miss Sabrina Brooks. So like shout out to her
Yes.
as well. So
Yes.
black ladies are leading the charge over here. I'm putting it to it. You and her. I love
As they
that.
say, the future is female.
Get into it. It needs to be, and that's right when we're at the ribbon cutting. I want it to be
Yes.
all ladies.
I mean, yes, that's what we need. That's what we need.
I love that so much. Oh my goodness. So what are you excited about most for this? What are you excited about most? And even not about the move, but like anything that's coming up. Like what are you most excited about for the museum?
Well, we're excited, one, because AMP celebrates Black History Month 365.
Yes.
And I love the sweatshirt that you have on today.
not in 1 month.
Because, you know, that's really, you know, sometimes the emphasis obviously is on Black History Month in February, but even just the resurgence that we've seen for the celebration of Juneteenth. Prior to this designation, for those who've been doing this work, you know, Juneteenth was like, you know, it was probably maybe third in the celebrations. Like it was Black History Month, Kwanzaa, and then Juneteenth.
Right.
Now Juneteenth is like, it's just taking off. So for instance, for AMP, last year we saw 10,816 people at our block party. And it's just like Juneteenth is we're happy
Yes.
because it's like this delayed recognition is so perfect in today's climate, particularly when people say this didn't happen or we got fake news, we got fake history. No, Juneteenth matters.
Yes.
Because the fact that someone, particularly in Texas, this is where we're going with that, they didn't know they were free. And I mean, even now we can make the argument about how civil liberties are being attacked. This is why institutions like AMP matter as well as other cultural sites, because we're always up against this narrative of to say, well, slavery wasn't that bad. And our obligation is to tell history unimpaired. Like we're going to give it from A to Z, all the information that says these lives mattered, their stories mattered, and that's what we do. So that's the role that I have to play, like the spirit of like activism going forward, because we're up against the story writers who will say or try to diminish what really was the impact. And we have to be the truth tellers. Like we're the vanguards.
Right. And I think that's why it's so amazing that you're leading this charge, right? And I think, having that connection to the history, it makes it mean so much more to you. And I think that's why I get so excited about the project, because my mom's been a African American history teacher since I was a baby, right? So this is, and taught at Afrocentric school, so this is something that's always been wrapped around me. So I took for granted that, I really took that for granted growing up. I always tell people I never like imagined people who just didn't have that attachment to their history. But then I started going to more PWIs and leaving Philly, which I never realized was so black until I left. Like I always, my example was that you can go on a SEPTA card and everybody will be black. You cannot do that in most cities. So you kind of get used to that. And it wasn't until I went to school in upstate New York, it was a PWI. I didn't go to a historically black college, and like having to argue with people about the meaning of my history, especially as a poli-sci major, where you're crossing history with politics, with people's feelings. It's like, no, this is what happened. And why do I have to argue you down about, my history and what my people have been through? Like, I would never do that about your cultures, because that was passed on through your folklore. So why is mine the one that you want to push back against? And I think that is what makes the black story so unique, is because we didn't just have to fight to be where we are. We had to fight to even just tell our story.
So sometimes everybody was talking about the imposter syndrome, and particularly for women of color, like how you were talking about being in spaces where sometimes you have to be the advocate. I just remember like growing up, because my education experience K through 12 was predominantly white, and sometimes there would be books where I didn't see myself. Grateful for the educators that were intentional. Like I had a 6th grade teacher, Miss Hauser. Some of my other teachers, I don't remember their names. But for her, I remember because she was so intentional about showing me books where people looked like me. I read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Just that mattered to me. But it helped me to see, because I went to a predominantly black church. So it was just like, I know there's more of us.
Right.
And so this whole notion of being unedited and being true, like it's so important about history, how to tell the story. Because even now, everything hasn't been told. We're still learning things about African American history in all sectors. There's just no area of this world where we haven't had a contribution. And I feel like sometimes people talk about the imposter syndrome. Like, I couldn't afford to be an imposter. Like, I had to be myself, because I was concerned about the people coming behind me. When I started off at school, I was probably mimicking my dad, because my dad went to the same school, but he graduated as class president. So, like, my goal was to be class president. But I could definitely tell when I started school to the time I finished, like that whole quote about, judging people not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Like, for African Americans, sometimes when we enter spaces, you have to prove more. You know what I'm saying? In the sense of who you are. Like, you don't sometimes get the benefit of just, get to know her. It's just
right from the front. Right.
Yeah. And so for me, being in this unedited space, like our museum should be spaces where people should be able to be themselves. And so I want to thank you for having me on here.
Of course.
This topic, because it's so true. People need to be themselves and unapologetically. Because there's really, Zora Neale Harrison says it best. There's no story like an untold, story. Like whatever you have that's in you, because you risk somebody else telling your story.
Right.
That's what we do with history, making sure your stories are captured so that no one else can sell it, so that no one else can put it on a motion picture. Because you have it, just document it. Like, that's the other thing that we'll have in a new space is an archaeology genealogy room where people can connect the dots. Because, the Middle Passage was a disruption. We lost people along the way. But for us to connect our stories back to Africa, a chance for people, if you have artifacts versus you discarding them, come to us.
Right.
Let us look at them. So I feel like this time, as we go into Black History Month, now is the time for people to like own it, to be it, and to do it. So like whatever you're thinking about, if we're like, I should be a playwright, write it.
Right.
Like, do it. We have all these great people, like the saying goes, to be young, gifted, and black. I mean, there's so much you can do. And that's the part where I see sometimes people get mad at others. Like, you don't have to get mad when you could just do it. just do it.
Right. Like we're not going to be able to progress forward if we're not living our true whole selves. And I think, again, this is the inspiration for the show, because a lot of, being a Black woman in politics, a young Black woman in politics, a lot of that, is about, or at least I used to think it was about hiding parts of myself and hiding different aspects of myself to kind of get along. But it was like, when I was showing up as my full self, when I was really started to make those connections and to really build, those bridges. I even think about our relationship, because it was just like, no, this is sis. She gonna be my good girlfriend from the beginning, right? Because I would want somebody to do that for me in this space and, matriculating into this, especially when my mission is so large. And I think that's why, I always appreciate our connection, because I just always want you to feel like, no, girl, we got you.
And that's what I feel like I do. Like if I have a question, you're there. And that I think sometimes is the make or break for those who are transplants when they are not able to successfully assimilate.
And that's why I want people to come to Philly, right? I want more people to come here. Like I get a little bit jealous when people want to move to Atlanta. I'm like, yeah, Atlanta is adult playground for sure. I have a good time, but you can have that here in Philly. But it's something about that Philly psyche sometimes that people don't think that we're welcoming. And I'm like, no, we actually love. We love people come here. We love when people choose Philadelphia, but it's also like we kind of put you through a couple of little tests to see if you really gonna stick around.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
Yes, but you still here.
I'm still here.
You're not going. We're not gonna let you go nowhere.
I'm not going anywhere. We're getting this done.
Yes, we are, and it's gonna be such an amazing legacy project. And I feel like we're gonna look back at this episode of the show and I'm gonna like, look how far we've come from there.
We definitely will have the time capsule.
Yes, we are, and you're gonna come back on there when we do the release, and we're gonna be speaking UNABRDG into the future. We're speaking the museum, like the ribbon cutting into the future. Like I'm so excited to watch this, and we'll make sure to keep the audience up to date, and as they can support the museum. And I always feel like my interviews go by so fast, but please tell people, number one, how they could be supportive of the museum, and also be supportive of you and your mission.
Yes, so the best way that people can stay connected to our museum, visiting our website, aampmuseum.org. That is where we have our membership updates, as well as most up-to-date activities for Black History Month, and then as well as just our journey to the Parkway. We will be unveiling new updates, talking about the renderings and how people can be a part of this experience, because really it's going to take everyone to help us to get to the Parkway. And we want to make this a people's journey of Philadelphia, going to the Parkway to help build this legacy project of the Black experience, as well as showing the importance of how cooperation through the Underground Railroad, we had whites and Blacks, we had Quakers, just people coming together. And so we want to show that in our new space on the Parkway. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jordan, and thank you so much for joining today. It almost didn't happen.
Much to talk about there, right?
But shout out to Dr. Jordan for still making it through and coming by, and also just sharing so much of your journey. And thank y'all so for tuning in. We will see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And that has been UNABRDG. Thank you so much for joining the journey. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch the show. Also, check out our website. That's UNABRDGpodcast.com. We'll see you in 2 weeks.